Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight on Thursday, the 25th of September, 2025. That makes this the news and the events for Wednesday, September 24th, day 1309 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5, coming to you this week not from Kyiv, but rather from Sophia, Bulgaria, where I am attending the Sophia International Improvisation Festival. Very much because of the generous support of viewers like Derek Sands, who I see just came in, and Jan Halverson, who is the sponsor of tonight's live, a first-time sponsor who supported the trip to Bulgaria. So if you see Jan around, please do thank him. Hey, Super User. Hey, Tommy Weber. How you guys doing tonight? Disco Sounds. Thanks, pal. How's everybody doing? Hey, Carl. Hey, Nicola. Hey, Derek. Hey, Maggie May. Hey, G2. Lola, good evening. Nicola Jones is here. Hey, Bernard. Van, you're right on time, buddy. Hey, Simon. How is everybody doing tonight? Greetings, Gary. Hey, Jerry O, my buddy in Ireland. Hey, Kent. Hey, Ed. It really is amazing. Hey, Clive Sutton. Hey, Drain Man. Valley Girl. Gag me with a spoon. Hey, Alice. Hey, Mike O'Connor. Dino. Kia ora. Scotty, what's up, man? Hey, Darlene. Hey, Maddie Wright, how you doing? There's Avi. Neil Steven. There's Nightshade. Nightshade, I think tonight, I could be wrong, but I think tonight is the first time ever that I included in the live something that you reported on. Like, just straight off, just took it right from you, which we will get to in a minute. But I'm pretty sure that's the first, right, like without us talking about it or you sending it to me, just one of your videos popped up and it was a great video and I added it to the live tonight. I think that's the first time that's happened. Thanks, P. I don't believe in God. Just to be clear. So if anybody here needs me to believe in God, you're in the wrong place. I don't know how anybody can look at the abduction of 20,000 Ukrainian children and think there's a God. You misspelled honored. That's an English-American joke right there. Hey, Seawolf. How's our boy Nutmegger doing, huh? Hey, Laddie. Hey, Feisty. All right, well, Feisty's here, so the gang is all here. We can get started. The very first thing, so I did a little walking tour of Bulgaria today, and a bunch of you were on that live. Hey, Marius. Good, Seawolf. Good to hear it. Hey, Azzy. A bunch of you were on that live this afternoon, and a couple of good questions were asked that led to some good conversation. And I wanna go back a little bit to that. So some of this, if you were on the live today, you did hear this. But the question of Ukrainian air superiority as an emergent capability of the Ukrainian armed forces. Hey, Flip, the importance of this cannot be underestimated, in my opinion. We are seeing a concerted effort. Hey, Eli. Hey, Roy Daniels. We are seeing a concerted effort by the Ukrainian armed forces to blind the Russians up and down the front line. And as they do so, Ukrainian aircraft can increasingly move with impunity and strike targets all up and down the front line. every week, right? First it was every week, then it was every day. We were talking about air defense assets and radar assets of the Russian Federation being hit by the Ukrainians. We are now at a critical inflection point in this war, where those air defense assets and radar assets have been so badly degraded by the Ukrainians that the Ukrainians are effectively, I mean, maybe not in the traditional like dogfights in the sky of fighter jets, but in terms of the ability to move freely in the skies over Ukraine, and therefore, with precision-guided munitions, strike critical Russian targets all up and down the front line. We are definitely living in that world. And the Russians are very certainly living in that world, or rather, failing to stay alive in that world. There's a lot of that going on. No two ways about it. Good evening, everybody. I see Kansas Steve is here and Steve O and some other folks. Nice to see you guys. So it is a different world. I keep talking about how the pace, the momentum of the war is changing. And I want to steal something right from Dr. K. Most of you know Dr. K, Carrie Oderman, who's a social scientist who studies how information is shared and how disinformation propagates. Brilliant woman, brilliant analysis on her channel. I reposted the video that I stole this from, that I'm going to share with you, because it emerged in the press today. Dr. K, if you search for Karistocracy, or if you take a look at my video reposts, I just reposted a video from her. I think, Steve-O, this is the beginning of the end. I really do. It feels that way anyway. And again, this is not me, right? This is the opinion of people like Hamish de Breton Gordon, who's a chemical weapons expert, a nuclear weapons expert, a former tank commander for the British Army, a guy who understands tours of duty in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. He understands the nature of warfare, and the modern army. And of late, he has been saying very clearly, and this is a direct quote, "In my opinion, the Russian army has culminated." That is to say that the Russian army is out of juice. They cannot move forward. They are no longer an operationally capable organization. And that's very much because of Ukrainian dominance in the skies today. That's eliminating Russian radars, eliminating Russian air defense assets, and decapitating the Russian high command, as we saw in multiple strikes last week against the headquarters of the 41st Combined Arms, no, the 5th Combined Arms Army, the 41st, I forget exactly, I want to say 41st Separate Mechanized Brigade maybe, and the occupation forces for Donetsk. Boom, everybody dead. In Zaporizhia, strikes against command and control. 18 officers of the high command of the Southern Military District eliminated. And it is important to point out that these are the guys who replaced the last bunch of guys, who in their own turn were replacements for the last bunch of guys. The generals on the Russian side are getting younger and younger. Your life expectancy is shorter and shorter every year this war goes on. Now, we saw in this context of Ukraine's precision against Russian assets on the battlefield and deep strikes inside the country, against that background of emergent air superiority and the Ukrainian armed forces being able to move in the skies with impunity against Russian targets. Against that backdrop, we have seen the Russians try to provoke NATO. And the common thinking among the best analysts that I listen to seems to be a consensus that Russia is doing this so that NATO countries get scared and start hoarding air defense and air assets for themselves rather than sending weapons to Ukraine. Now, of course, Putin thinks this way because that's how Putin would respond, right? Out of fear. That is not how NATO is responding. But the fact is that NATO is not geared to, it doesn't have the resources to cost effectively knock these drones out of the sky. So it emerged in the press today that Ukraine has offered to send units to Poland to help the Poles shoot down drones, to train the Poles on anti-drone solutions. And it was Dr. K who made what I thought was the very powerful point that after years of being pummeled by Russian drones and begging NATO for air defense assets and to assist in helping to clear the skies for the Ukrainians, and NATO and our allies refusing to do any of that. When Russian drones entered NATO airspace, Ukraine did not hesitate to offer its assistance. Ukraine is the shield of democracy in the world right now. It is the thin red line that separates the nightmare regime and gangsterism of the Russian Federation from civilized Europe. And we should be doing everything that we can to support Ukraine in its own defense and the maintenance of its sovereignty. A failure in Ukraine will mean war and devastation in Europe and a nightmare for the next 30 years for hundreds of millions of people in Central Europe who are all Central Asia and Europe, who are all chafing at the bit to be rid of the yoke of Russian oppression. So, again, if you don't follow Dr. K, I encourage you to. Her insights are brilliant. And that was a very powerful statement, I thought, that she made today. I really did. Now, this is not the story, Nightshade, that I stole from you. Right, we know that one of the things that the Ukrainians hit today was Novorossiysk, and we were talking about that a little bit today. But it is important to recognize that in Novorossiysk, where the Black Sea Fleet is currently hiding from a country that has no navy, but has sunk fully half the tonnage of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. The Ukrainians hit it with naval drones and aerial drones, but we don't have any good evidence that they hit anything. It seems to have been a hit and a miss, is what it looks like. There's video of the Russians blowing Ukrainian unmanned surface vehicles right out of the water. Some pretty stunning footage of the defense of Novorossiysk. But we don't have good evidence of them being hit. The story that I stole from Nightshade today is the video of Alexei Smirnov. So Alexei Smirnov is just a Russian grunt, right? He's a frontline troop fighting for Mother Russia. And he recorded a video today and published it on the web, saying that he is the only one left alive from his unit of 20 soldiers. He's cautioning his fellow Russians not to come to Ukraine, that it is not their war. Think about their sons and their own lives. And it's a video of desperation. It's a video of despair. It's a video of a man who knows he is not going to live to see another sunrise, or maybe one more. He's done. And it's not just Alexei Smirnov that is done. The Russian army is done. The Russian army is done. Again, in the words of Hamish de Bretton Gordon, in my opinion, the Russian army has culminated. They cannot move forward. Now, look, you know I don't put any credence in anything Donald Trump says. Everybody here knows that, right? And this about face that everybody is talking about, that Trump is suddenly on Ukraine's side. Actions speak louder than. Let's wait and see what happens. Because God knows a Tuesday Trump has nothing in common with a Thursday Trump, right? The guy is just full of shit. So we cannot count on him in any way. One of the things, right? He's talking all this bullshit about Ukraine. Ukraine can take back all its territory. Ukraine can do this. Ukraine can go even further, yada, yada. He's talking all this shit, but you know what he's not doing? Is sending weapons. You know what else he's not doing? Sending cash. You know what else he's not doing? Right. It's hot air. It's bullshit. But why would he say it? Why, just 5 months after he had the nerve to say, Zelensky, you have no cards. You have no cards. Why, 5 months after that, is he suddenly saying, you can take all your territory back? Zelensky said, Trump has knowledge about the military and economic situation inside Russia. Now, look, we don't know what knowledge this might be that the Donald thinks he has. But for any of us paying attention, we know goddamn well that these strikes against oil infrastructure inside of the Russian Federation are wreaking havoc on the Russian economy. And more importantly, or perhaps not more importantly, but also additionally, they are putting a stress on the social fabric of the Russian Federation that it cannot take. The Russian Federation is not a country. It is not a bunch of Russians living together in peace. It is the result of Russian imperial conquest of hundreds of ethnic groups that have been oppressed for generations inside of Russia. The deep well of resentment of these people who are treated as second-class citizens, kept impoverished, kept under the thumb of an imperial Moscow with an iron fist. If Russia's iron fist rusts and is hollowed out by the Ukrainian armed forces, what's to keep them together? What glue, what social glue will cement the Russian Federation together? There isn't any. A lot of these oblasts, a lot of these autonomous federal republics enjoyed their own independence for a short while after the dissolution of the USSR. It was mostly Putin's efforts that clamped down on them and dragged them back in. And lots of them want out. Russia will not survive this as we know it today. will simply not survive this conflict with Ukraine. Just in the same way that Ukraine is slicing and dicing and dismantling the front line, that's what's going to happen to the Russian Federation. It is now inevitable. Now, if you were to ask me for a timeline of this inevitability, I would say exactly what I have been saying for the last 2.5 years. Within 36 months of the fighting in Ukraine stopping. Within 36 months, right? It was 36 months after the fall of the Berlin Wall that the USSR fell apart. We can expect the same kind of timeline, in my opinion. Big D says, why don't Russian soldiers start walking out? They're walking out, Big D. They're walking out in droves. Now, last year, we got a report from the Ukrainian main military intelligence directorate of Ukraine that 18,000 Russian soldiers had gone AWOL in the southern military district alone. That number is much higher this year. And not only that, Big D, you think about what we're seeing with POWs, right? It's not one POW or one guy and his buddy anymore. It's entire companies. The whole unit, the whole company is surrendering en masse. They're not shooting the one guy who wants to surrender. They're all going in it together, right? Mike Kelly is saying there that 2,000 went to court for leaving the lines. So these are the guys that they caught. Now, most of the guys that they catch, they just send to the front line with no weapons or ammunition, right? But some of them they're now prosecuting. If you get out of Ukraine and you're hiding in Russia and you're discovered, they send you to jail, right? I forget, I want to say, is it 18 years for desertion? I'm not sure, but it's a long-ass time in a gulag. Longer than the average life expectancy of people sent there. That's for fucking sure. Now, on the subject, the other thing that came up this afternoon, Pete asked the question, can you give us an update on what's happening on the front lines? The news there is all very good. And it could be that Trump has some knowledge about all of this that we don't have, that his intelligence community has provided him with assessments that you and I are not privy to. But I can tell you this, in the Sumy direction, we know that where the Russians have not retreated, they are encircled or nearly encircled. All the remaining elements of the 810th Naval Marines, Naval Infantry, the Russian Marines, that are still in Sumy are currently encircled by the Ukrainians. Then you've got the Kupiansk salient that is being sliced and diced. And then you got Pokrovsk, or not Pokrovsk, but the Dobropilla sector, right, just northeast of Pokrovsk, where we saw that big incursion, 16 kilometers behind the Ukrainian lines, hundreds of Russian soldiers pushing through there, right? Not anymore. That entire salient, not just the 16 kilometers, but the bulk of that salient ahead of Dobropilla has been cut off from the main body of Russian forces. There are now an estimated, I forget the number. There's an estimated 1,300 Russian troops trapped inside a new third cauldron. So we know about the two smaller cauldrons that have a couple hundred troops in them. A new cauldron has been created with 1,300 troops inside of it. The entire Russian northeast salient of the Pokrovsk sector is now severed from the main body of Russian forces. The more men that they try to pour in there to save the situation, the more that get trapped and eliminated. In the words of Dominic Nichols, you don't invest in failure. Pokrovsk, well, Dobrapilla anyway, is a failure. And the Russians just keep pouring good troops after Cargo 200. It's a bad situation for them. Ukrainian artillery covers every approach to the sector. Drones are swarming in the air and hunting down everyone in the cauldrons. As infantry, after the positions are softened up, goes in and conducts cleanup operations. 7 towns fully liberated, another 9 cleared, some 330 square kilometers of Ukrainian land liberated in the last 10 days in that sector. 330 square kilometers in 10 days. Russia hasn't taken 10 square kilometers in 10 days in 2 years. In 2 years. Ammo shortages, logistics disruptions, and depleted reserves as Ukraine dismantles the Russian offensive around Pokrovsk are leading to some of the largest single day Russian losses we have seen in months. According to, where am I getting my data? Well, according to the SBU, the Security Services of Ukraine, in that sector in the last 10 days, 100 Russian POWs have been taken. And again, we have seen, they ate all the donkeys, Seawolf. They're starving. They can't get resupplied. The donkeys got eaten. Let's be clear. That's what happened to the donkeys. In the last 10 days, in the Dobrapilla sector, we've seen 100 POWs taken. And again, it's not 1 or 2 guys surrendering. It's the whole unit. So we're seeing groups, well, or what's left of the unit. We're seeing groups of 7, 10, 13 surrendering en masse. We've seen, according to the Security Services of Ukraine, 1,322 Russian soldiers KIA in that offensive. Another 1,134 wounded in action. These are significant numbers for this sector, right? So it is not just Dobrapilla. It is not just Sumy. It is not just Kupiansk. The Russians are suffering all up and down the line. And more importantly, they keep drawing reserves from other sectors and pouring them into the Dobrapilla kill zone. This is not a recipe for success, my friends. Not in any way, shape, or form. It is a recipe for disaster. And in terms of Russia's economic, so that's Russia on the battlefield, right? And we think that Trump knows all of this, or has been briefed on all of this, maybe has a slightly clearer picture of just how many fucking aces up his sleeve Zelensky has. Hang on, William. We'll get to the railroads in a second because that's a great point, pal. And I got some news for you on that. Let me do that next. But in terms of the economy, you got Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission, making the commitment at the UN today that Europe will free itself of all Russian fossil fuels by 2027. By 2027. That's going to hurt. Now, on the subject of railroads, where is it here? Okay. In Belgorod today, or overnight last night, we saw a key railroad hub for military asset transfer to the temporarily occupied territories hit, complicating troop rotation and resupply. Now, look, if you're going to fight a war, you got to get the guys off the front line and you got to get fresh troops in there on a regular and ongoing basis. Every time the Ukrainians hit these rail lines and delay troop movements and troop rotations, you are ensuring that the guys on the front line get worn down, get more and more exhausted, more and more hopeless. And if you can cut off their resupply of ammunition, food, and medicine at the same time you cut off the resupply of fresh troops, you create a fog of despair and demoralization. And that's why we saw Alexei Smirnov record his video to his fellow Russians. Don't come here. Think of your children. Think of your family. I am the one guy left of 20 guys in my unit. All the others are Cargo 200, which of course is the Russian code for killed in action. Cargo 200. Wounded in action is Cargo 300. KIA is Cargo 200. Logistics. An army runs on its stomach. If they're not getting fed, if they don't have bullets, they can't move forward. They just can't. Oh, hey, Samso. How you doing, buddy? Now, all of this on the front line and this limitation or constraints on Russian logistics happens against the backdrop of deep strikes inside Russia. Now, this is particularly true in the last 24 hours in the Kursk direction. In Kursk, what we have seen are coordinated Ukrainian airstrikes on power substations, blacking out Lvov, Rilsk, and Koronevo. All of those, not really Russian border towns with Ukraine, but the main line of defense in Kursk, are all out of power. And so when the power is out, you're at war. These are military, basically, installations. Because the civilians have all fled, you put everybody in lockdown. And so all of Kursk right now, or not all of Kursk, but the main military HQs and operational and logistics centers in Kursk are in the dark and under tight security lockdowns, which is going to drive paranoia through the roof, right? If any shooting starts, however innocent it was to begin with, people are going to bleed. They're going to bleed. Can Ukraine hit deep inside Russia with U.S. weapons? You know, Anthony, Tommy, Tom, that's a great question because we hear all this bullshit from Trump about how he's so on Ukraine's side now, right? But the official DOD position is no. Ukraine cannot use American weapons inside of Russia right now. So actions speak louder than words, right, Steph? His actions tell us we shouldn't trust Trump. No way. No way. Hey, Howard Belmore, how you doing, buddy? Okay. Now that's strikes inside Kursk, Russia. What else have the Ukrainians hit inside Russia that makes Trump talk about how Russia's economy is in such bad shape? Well, for the second time this week, Ukrainian drones slammed into one of the largest oil refineries in all of Mother Russia, the Gazprom facility in Bashkortostan. Now they hit the vacuum distillation unit this time. And this is a facility that produces 150 different products, from high-test gasoline to 92 octane to diesel to asphalt, bitumen. The list goes on, right? The SBU Alpha Group is claiming responsibility for this attack. This attack, 1,400 kilometers. Nearly, what is that, like 900 miles or so, just about like 860 miles, something like that. Over 850 miles from the Ukrainian border. Ukrainian drones flew 1,400 kilometers through Russian airspace, 800 miles, to precisely hit not a giant oil refinery, but rather the main vacuum distillation unit. The critical piece of equipment that you can't refine crude oil without. That was not all that Ukraine hit last night. Not even by a long shot. I'm not even going to go over everything that they hit because we would be here all night. But I'm going to give you the fucking highlights reel. That's for sure. In Volgograd, we saw 2 key oil pumping stations, conduits for moving crude oil on the pipeline network in Russia to the refineries. People are waiting in line for gas. You got to get that crude oil from the fields to the refineries. How does Russia do it? On the Iron Horse, what they call the Iron Horse. If you imagine the horse's tail are the pipelines from the Siberian oil fields. The backbone of the horse runs right across Mother Russia. The neck of the horse is a pipeline that goes up to Moscow. And then the legs of the horse go down to the southern refineries in Volgograd, in Bashkortostan, in Krasnodar Krai, and Rostov, right? That oil is not flowing through some of those legs today because of these hits on these key pumping stations. In Belgorod, military-industrial complex. In Belgorod, the Frez plant suffered what the Ukrainians are claiming is structural damage to its main machinery workshop. Now, Frez is a tool maker and a machine maker. And they have a lot of contracts with the military as well as private enterprise. This is going to mean delays of critical equipments and machine parts that these guys are the only ones in Russia producing for the military. It's these kinds of deep strikes against Russia's military-industrial complex with the very limited drones. Think about how limited the weapons are that Ukraine has to engage in this fight. They're using drones with a maximum of 250 kilos of TNT equivalent on them. That's not enough to disable an oil refinery for long. Most estimates of the repair time for the oil refineries that have been hit in the last 40 days, well, now it's 52 days. In the last 52 days are about another 10 days. About another 10 days at the current repair rate, and Russia's going to be back to 100% refining capacity. Right, Anthony? Ukraine needs missiles. Now, how many missiles they need is another question, because the flamingos are not stealthy. It's being reported, but it's not being confirmed by the Ukrainians, that in that strike, that first flamingo strike we saw in Crimea, only one of the missiles got through, the other 2 got shot out of the sky, because they are not stealthy in any way. Hey, Reefer Man. Now, look, I have been unable to confirm that story. But given the lack of detail that we got out of the SBU and the GUR on that strike, it could be true. It could be true. And that may be why we're not seeing the flamingos fly quite yet. Because if they have to fire 3 of the flamingos for every one that's going to hit the target, they need to send them up in large volleys. Now, we saw something very interesting. So I didn't talk about it yesterday because I didn't know about it. And in the intervening 24 hours, some more details have emerged about that big strike, that big drone strike on Moscow
overnight Sunday night. One of the things that has emerged is that the Ukrainians used balloons as decoys. They filled the skies over Moscow, not just with Ukrainian drones, but with big ass, like hot air balloons, basically, smaller than that. Shadows, radar shadows, decoys to overwhelm, hey Lev, to overwhelm Russian air defenses and radars. Brilliant. So overnight Sunday night in Moscow, air defense and civilian aviation were thrown into confusion and disarray. Not merely as a large drone swarm came into Moscow's airspace, but rather as dozens, a buffet of balloons, of radar decoys filled the sky, making target identification and acquisition nearly impossible for the Russians. Now, how they did it, how they made these balloons appear to be drone targets, I don't understand. I don't understand that. And I don't have even a layman's explanation to give to you right now. But this is what we are being told happened in Moscow overnight on Sunday. And why the Russian response, the Russian air defense response, was so lackluster, confused, and apparently disoriented, lacking focus, lacking even the ability to do proper target ID and acquisition, appears to be the case. The Ukrainians are brilliant. I mean, anybody who does not stand in awe of the ingenuity of these people who have done so much with so little for so long is either a cynical asshole who's jaded by life or is just not paying attention. Okay, last thing from me. Last thing? Yep, last thing. Lloyd's List, which Lloyd's of London is one of the major insurers of cargo ships in the world. You know, if you're shipping 1 million barrels of oil a day in your container or in your tankers, you go to Lloyd's for your insurance. That's how the world works, right? Maritime insurance. Just before I came on, 2 planes collided in Moscow on the ground. Well, probably just drunk. That's a great question, Kurian. I don't know the answer to that. That is a great question. I meant to bring that up, actually. How did those balloons get there at the same time as the drones? That you wouldn't think that's possible, would you? So it seems to me that there's certainly a good chance that those balloons were launched from inside Russia by partisans. I think so. I don't know that. We don't know that. But it would make sense. Now, dig this. Lloyd's List is saying that over 30 Russian-sanctioned cargo fleet tankers have, in the last 90 days, have been reflagged as ships of Oman, flying an Omani flag as a flag of convenience. Not only are these shadow fleet vessels now flying Omanian flags, but Oman is profiting from facilitating the transfer of oil from Russian shadow fleet tankers to other vessels that can deliver them to port and kind of scrub the history of where that oil came from. So I don't think Oman is doing itself any favors being on the wrong side of history for a little short-term profit. Not in the least. Okay. I don't think the drones could have brought them. It would be too much drag. Think about the drag that a balloon with a 10-meter diameter would have on those drones. I don't think they'd have the fuel to make it. Not unless somehow I don't know. The only other way to do it would be to inflate the balloons somehow automatically when they got into the Moscow airspace using like compressed helium canisters. So the drone would release them, the helium would deploy, the balloon would fly. But then you're talking about the payload of the helium on top of the drone payload. I think it's much more likely that it was locals. That's a good point, Seawolf. You'd have to know which way the wind was blowing. Okay. Guys, again, big thanks to Jan Halverson, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. If anybody sees Jan around, please thank him. Big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and who lets me freely quote him on my program. Thank you, Nightshade. And to Lars, who has the Discord server, and to the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk, Jay, Pete, Travis, and of course, Maddie and Feisty. Russians are not contributing to drone funding in Russia. That is not a thing. Thanks, Nightshade. Dr. K is Dr. Carrie Oderman, PhD. She goes by the name Dr. K or the Karistocracy, like Kara, because her first name is Karistocracy. And she's a political scientist who studies how disinformation and information are shared. Jim, the balloons do have their own, as I understand it, they have some limited capability to direct their own course, but not over 400 kilometers, I don't think. I don't think. Maybe. So, and I brought up Dr. K today because she said something powerfully brilliant, and I wanted to quote her on it tonight. And I did. We did that. Thanks, Gare. Hey, Steve Arnold. Good evening. Evening, Noel Patrick. I don't have... Nightshade, do we know what unit Alexei Smirnov was attached to? Now, Dawn Patrols could easily be quoting me here. Dawn Patrols is saying, tip, check out Jay in Kyiv at YouTube. No nonsense guy. Correct. Jay in Kyiv, who's very big on Twitter, like 130,000 followers, or maybe more now. He recently launched a YouTube channel, and I do recommend it. Good insights into what's happening here, filled with a lot of righteous indignation, I would say. Is there any? Yeah, nope. Maddie follows Dr. K. We did talk about Pokrovsk-Lesno. At this juncture, if I'm not mistaken, the Ukrainians have recaptured 330 square kilometers in just the Dobro-Pila sector alone. They have trapped over 1,300 Russian soldiers in a new cauldron that they have created and are hunting them down with drones even as we speak. While all the Russian efforts to get reinforcements in there or resupply in there are failing because the ground lines of communication are under Ukrainian artillery fire control. So everybody they try to send in there to save the guys are just being sent into a kill zone, and they never even reach the contact line. Craig, don't listen to anything Trump says. None of us can believe anything he says. There's no reason to believe anything he says. Tuesday Trump has nothing in common with Thursday Trump. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's see what he does. Maybe he could start by telling the Ukrainians, hey, here's a bunch of JDAMs and Tomahawks, and you can fire them into Russian space. That'd be nice. Or even just, hey, I know you don't have any ATACMs left, but here's some we were going to have to pay to decommission. Why don't you use them on Russian territory? That'd be nice. Something. Here's some javelins, and oh yeah, you can take them to the front. You don't have to keep them in fucking Lviv. I would consider any of that to be an improvement over the diarrhea of the mouth that the orange turd subjects us all to. TK's daddy knows what I'm talking about. 2023 and 2024 were the first years in decades that we saved money on decommissioning. It would have cost tens of millions of dollars to decommission the 40-year-old weapons we sent to Ukraine. Weapons that Ronald Reagan and George Bush I paid for. Give me a break. What about the Flamingo engine factory attack? I don't know anything about that. Did they send flamingos against a tank engine factory or something? Has Ukraine air superiority in Sumy, in Kherson, in Pokrovsk? How is that possible? It's been a long haul, Lesno. It's been 18 months of grinding precision operations in which we saw 3 F-16s lost, 2 F-16 pilots lost, a couple of MiGs, but the pilots ejected successfully in both those cases. So it has not been an easy road. It has not been an inexpensive venture. It has been a long, grinding effort to get there. And after 18 months of that grind, we are seeing it pay off. Thanks, Joe. How you doing, buddy? Howard is saying it was quiet in Western Ukraine. Good. Oh, God, no. Wait a minute. Are you guys talking about the Flamingo factory being destroyed by the Russians? Dude, the Russians keep saying that. They've been saying that for weeks. There is zero evidence to indicate that that is true. Zero evidence. Now, look, it could be, right? Maybe the Ukrainians aren't telling us. That could be. But I have no evidence to indicate that anything like that is true. Steph makes a good point. Ukraine, in the crucible of this war, has evolved a new modern military that looks completely different from the military that Russia went to war with. It's a great point, Steph. All the territory, baby. They can get all their territory back, and maybe they won't stop there. What does that mean? You know, I love how he finished that tweet, though. I wish the best to both sides. What do you mean, you wish the best to both sides? Yes, the freedom fighters for an emergent democracy whose sovereign nation has been invaded by a genocidal, murderous lunatic in the Kremlin. I wish you both the best. I hope it works out for both of you. We don't live in a world where it can work out for both sides in such a conflict. That is not a thing. God, he's insane. Anthony, come on. It's not that simple. If Ukraine had the gloves off, this war would have been over 2 years ago. Ukraine's had to find some gloves first, then figure out how to put them on while being shot at. I mean, they don't have the weapons. They don't have the manpower. They've had to do it all inside of this war. The international legions are doing brilliant, particularly the Brazilians. You're not wrong, Steve-O. The Brazilians right now are handling, as I understand it, that Kupiansk salient. So that forward movement of the Russians toward Kupiansk, they're getting sliced and diced by the Brazilians. But, and you know, I love the Portuguese language. I love Brazilians. I used to, so I love these people, right? I could listen to Portuguese all day. Esse amor compaixão, ai que coisa. Love it. And you're not wrong, Steve. Brazilians in Ukraine are doing a hell of a job. But the Colombians, shit, man. The Colombians may be fighting even more fiercely than their Ukrainian counterparts. The stories I hear from Ukrainians about the Colombians, they are an asset to the people of Ukraine that will be remembered for a long time. I had the opportunity to work in Brazil. I agree with you, says Bip. Cool, man. I've never been. I'd like to go. I would really like to go. Heroim Slava, Drew Moscow. Drew Moscow, but you're saying Slava Ukraine? That's weird. That's super weird, dude. What the heck? Are you coming in from number 55? Who are you? Not the governments of Brazil and Colombia, no. Soldiers for hire, right? In the International Legion, who have joined the Ukrainian armed forces as international legionnaires. Sorocaba. I don't know what that means, Bip. It's inside last name. Well, whatever. Hey, Courtney Davis. Colombians. Da, 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 da. Yeah, no, the only country that has supplied troops officially to this war besides Russia and Ukraine is North Korea. Putin bought 15,500 North Koreans and then sent them mostly all home in boxes. Yeah, I don't think you are, Drew. And if somebody get me this guy's IP address, would you? I'd like to know. I stand behind UA and a lot of people in our country, but I am sorry for our administration. What country are you in, Lesno? I can't tell from that tiny little flag. I mean, the North Koreans didn't have any choice, Steph. Kim sold them to the Russians, and that was all that there was to it. No intrusion into NATO territories last night, no. I think we have probably seen the end of that. I think we've seen the end of that after this UN meeting. No intrusion. I stand behind Ukraine and a lot of people in our country, but I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. What's happening in Crimea is that the Ukrainians are making Crimea untenable for the Russians to remain there. There are Americans in the International Legion. Yep, Ronnie, you're right. I've met some of them. A great guy by the name of John Kennedy, no relation, was in a helicopter that got shot down in eastern Ukraine. Had to go home for rehabilitation. He was badly injured. But I believe that his prognosis is very good. So, yes, there are Americans fighting in the International Legion as well. Have you spoke about the airspace invasions on NATO soil and my opinion on them? We have spoken about that. And my opinion is that in the wake of these incursions into NATO EU space, the Ukrainians, who have been begging Europe and NATO for years to help clean the skies out over Ukraine and keep Ukrainians safe, turned around without hesitation and offered the Poles training on how to shoot these drones down effectively, which to me says an awful lot about Ukrainian priorities. They value their friends and they are happy to come to their aid when they can. This would be a great time to do the bridge. Maybe. Who said that? Drew? Sorry, I scrolled away now. And now I got to do my puzzle piece. Hold on. Oh, for the love of God, come on. Thank you. Ukrainians have been training Venezuela. I don't think so, Big D. I'd be very interested in any evidence you have to that. Mike Kelly, I don't know what 185 is in reference to. Don't block me. I'm a big fan of yours. Are you now? All right. Okay, guys, it's past 1 a.m. here, and I got a long day tomorrow. So I'm going to call it a night. Big thanks to Jan Halverson, who was the sponsor of tonight's live. Big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peach group on the Book of Faces. Oh, hey, there's Dr. K. You missed it, Carrie. I ripped you off word for word. And I gave you no credit at all. Tell him, everybody. Did I mention Dr. K at all in this live? I actually led with your quote. And I did give you credit because it was beautifully phrased and a powerful statement that I could not improve on. And so thanks for dropping by. Nice to see you. Only 10 times. There you go. Good night. Take care, Doc. Thanks for dropping by. Nice to see you. Follow me from Warsaw. Are you in Warsaw? I'm in Sophia now. I was just in Warsaw to catch a plane to Sophia. I'd never been in Bulgaria before. It's cool. How, after all sanctions, Russia's still alive? Who is helping? Mostly the Chinese. Mostly the Chinese, but certainly the Iranians and the North Koreans as well. Oh, security forum next week. Can you get me in? I wish. Anyway, have a great trip. Be safe. We'll definitely follow you in Warsaw. Everybody check out Dr. K next week from the Security Forum in Warsaw. Yeah, well, I'm doing this conference all day and then I'm doing this live stream at midnight. So yeah, I am tired. $190K. Boy, that's not even a record anymore, is it, Lars? Didn't we break 200 once or twice? I think our top 4 were 200 plus. 17 hours on a bus does take it out of me, boy, I'll tell you. 273K was the high, was it? That's interesting. I don't care about likes, Bip. I care about information. All right, everybody. I'm calling it a night. I'm going to bed. Make it a great day.